This is VOA News. Via remote, I'm Marissa Melton. As 10 U.S. states record a spike in coronavirus cases, U.S. President Joe Biden warned on Tuesday that, quote, millions of Americans are still unvaccinated and unprotected, and because of that, their communities are at risk. In his latest broadcast appeal for people to get vaccinated against COVID-19, the president said the Delta variant of the virus, which is more transmissible and potentially more dangerous, is already responsible for half of the cases in many parts of the country. The states of Kansas and Missouri, in particular, are reporting double-digit percentage surges in infections due to the Delta variant. Biden said the federal government is mobilizing COVID-19 surge response teams staffed with experts from federal emergency and health agencies. Shortly before Biden spoke, the leader of the opposition Republicans in the U.S. Senate, Mitch McConnell, said in Kentucky, his home state, that only about 43% of residents there are fully inoculated. He said there's no good reason not to get vaccinated. He spoke in his home state of Kentucky, where about 43% of residents are fully inoculated. Vaccine hesitancy, especially among Republicans, is blamed for the Biden administration falling short of its goal to have 70% of American adults at least partially inoculated against COVID-19 by July 4th. Only 45% of Republicans have received their first dose, according to a Washington Post ABC News poll. That same poll shows 86% of Democrats saying they've gotten their vaccination. As Indonesia reported another day of record fatalities from COVID-19 on Tuesday, an Indonesian official said the country has prepared backup medical facilities for a worst-case scenario where daily coronavirus infections might reach 40,000 to 50,000. More on that story at our website, voanews.com. This is VOA News. The Canadian Indigenous group that announced last month the discovery of an estimated 751 unmarked graves near a former residential school said on Tuesday it would take charge of its own child welfare services under an agreement with the Canadian government. The accord marks the first time in 70 years the community will have control over child and family services among its members. It is the first such agreement under a 2019 law meant to give Indigenous groups more control over child welfare in their communities and reduce the overrepresentation of Indigenous children in foster care. In Saskatchewan, 80% of children in foster care are Indigenous, according to a 2018 report. Canada is reeling from the discoveries of more than 1,000 unmarked graves at the sites of former residential schools where Indigenous children attended. Many of those graves are believed to be of children. The United Nations rights chief warned on Tuesday the dire situation in Myanmar since its February coup was driving the country toward possible civil war and could spark regional insecurity. Speaking before the UN Human Rights Council, Michelle Bachelet lamented that Myanmar in recent months, quote, has evolved from a political crisis to a multidimensional human rights catastrophe. Myanmar has experienced mass protests and a brutal military response since the February 1st coup, which ousted civilian leader Aung San Suu Kyi. The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights says nearly 900 people have been killed, while about 200,000 have been forced to flee their homes since that coup. At the same time, at least 5,200 people have been arbitrarily arrested, including more than 90 journalists. This according also to the United Nations. 8 major media outlets have been forced to close. Meanwhile, lawyers for ousted Myanmar leader Aung San Suu Kyi argued strongly Tuesday against the introduction of evidence by prosecutors against her on a sedition charge, saying it did not follow established judicial procedures. Suu Kyi is under detention and is being tried on several charges, including an allegation that she illegally imported walkie-talkies for her bodyguards' use and used the radios without a license. She's also charged with violating COVID-19 pandemic restrictions on 2 occasions during the 2020 election campaign. She went on trial on June 14th in a closed court in the capital, Naypyidaw, and proceedings that the military-installed government is widely seen as using to discredit her and consolidate its control. And UNICEF says 4.5 million children in South Sudan face a humanitarian crisis, and the organization needs more money to help. The announcement comes on the 10th anniversary of that country's independence. Via remote, I'm Marissa Melton, VOA News.